My name is Evelyn Carter, and this is the story of how love became a loaded weapon in my hands. For 5 years, I believed I was living in a fairy tale. He was charming, ambitious, and knew how to make me feel like the center of the universe. We built dreams together. Late-night talks about the future, whispered promises in the dark. I thought we were unshakable. But fairy tales are for children, and I was about to wake up in a nightmare. The truth didn't come softly. It tore through me like glass in my veins, leaving no room for innocence. It started like any other night. He was in the shower, steam curling around the bathroom door, while I lay on the bed scrolling through my phone. His phone buzzed beside me, screen lighting up with a name I recognized all too well, my friend, Claire. I almost didn't open it, but curiosity, that dangerous whisper, pushed me over the edge. What I saw didn't feel real. Messages overflowing with longing, secret dates, and hotel bookings that lined up perfectly with his business trips. My breath caught, and the air felt suddenly heavier. Like the walls themselves knew the truth. Each swipe revealed more filth than the last. Pet names that weren't mine, inside jokes I'd never heard, and photographs that made my skin crawl. The timestamps mocked me while I'd been home, cooking his favorite dinner or waiting for his call. He'd been with her. I could almost hear his voice in my head, feeding me lies so easily I wondered if truth had ever been part of his vocabulary. My hands trembled, but not from sadness. It was something colder, sharper, a numbness that crept from my chest outward, until I could barely feel my own heartbeat. I thought betrayal would make me cry, but no tears came. Instead, it was like a switch flipped inside me. Everything I had ever done for him, every sacrifice, every moment of loyalty suddenly felt like a mistake carved in stone. I stared at his phone, my reflection faint in the dark screen when it locked again. That was when I realized something had broken inside me. Not my heart, it was still beating, steady and cold, but the invisible chain that had kept me devoted to him, no matter the cost. And once that chain snapped, there was no fixing it. The sound of the shower running felt distant, as though I were underwater. I put his phone back exactly where it had been, careful not to leave a trace. My body moved mechanically, crossing my legs, picking up my own phone, pretending to scroll while my mind was already racing ahead. What would I do? Would I confront him? Walk away? Or something else? My pulse quickened at the thought of something else. It was dangerous, but so was he. He just didn't know I had discovered the game we were playing, and that I was about to change the rules. When he walked out of the bathroom, towel draped over his hips, he smiled at me like nothing was wrong. That smile used to make me melt. Now it made my stomach turn. He kissed my forehead, asked what I was reading, and I lied, smooth, effortless. I'd been watching him for years, learning his tells, his weaknesses. He had no idea I was already planning. And that's when it hit me. The worst part wasn't that he cheated. It was that he had underestimated me, thinking I was too in love, too naive, to ever become his biggest threat. The rest of the evening was a blur of fake laughter and casual conversation. I let him talk about his meetings, his big client deal, all while those same words echoed in my head from Claire's messages. He didn't just cheat, he choreographed it, turned my life into the stage for his little performance. But if he wanted a show, I'd give him one he'd never forget. I smiled, nodding at the right moments, keeping my voice steady. Inside, the storm was gathering. I knew I couldn't just walk away quietly. Not after this. Quiet wouldn't hurt enough. That night, I lay awake beside him, watching the slow rise and fall of his chest. He slept like a man with nothing to fear, and that alone fueled the fire inside me. He didn't know the woman he betrayed was already gone. In her place was someone colder, sharper, and infinitely more dangerous. I traced the outline of his shoulder in the dim light, not with affection, but with calculation. Every betrayal deserves a consequence, and his would be nothing short of ruin. The first crack had formed, and soon, the entire structure of his life would come crashing down. I knew the only way to destroy him was from the inside. So I kept my mask on tight. To him, I was still Evelyn, the loving, supportive girlfriend, who laughed at his jokes and believed his excuses. I let him think the world was exactly as he left it, perfectly under his control. But behind my polite smiles and gentle touches, I was gathering threads. Every story he told me, every slip of the tongue, every business call I overheard, I stored them all away like weapons. He'd built his life on lies, and I was about to pull every string. The first step was to understand his empire. He wasn't rich by accident, He was clever, but also reckless. While he boasted about his legitimate work, I began looking deeper into his finances. It started with casually checking the mail before he did, memorizing account statements and unfamiliar company names. That's when I discovered the offshore account hidden under a shell company with a name so bland it practically begged to be ignored. I made copies of everything. My hands shook the first time, not from guilt, but from the thrill of finally seeing his secrets unravel in my hands. His shady side hustles were even worse than I imagined. Fake invoices for jobs that never happened. Payments funneled through consultants who didn't exist. Every piece of it was a brick in the house he thought was indestructible. I started mapping out his network partners, suppliers, clients and realized something critical. Almost all of it depended on me. My contacts, my introductions, my reputation. He thought he was the architect of his success, but without my foundation, it would all crumble. And when it did, I'd be there to watch the dust rise and settle over his broken little kingdom. The beauty of pretending to be clueless was that it made him careless. Over dinner, he'd brag about the brilliant deals he closed, and I'd nod along, slipping the details into my mental file. He even started confiding in me about minor problems, unaware that I was quietly amplifying them. I'd forget to pass along a message to a supplier or subtly misquote him to a potential client. Nothing big enough to raise suspicion, just enough to plant little cracks. He once told me trust was the most valuable currency in business. Soon, he'd have none left to spend. It was almost too easy. While he thought I was home scrolling through my phone, I was digging through his desk, scanning contracts, and copying receipts onto a flash drive I kept hidden in my boot. I learned the passwords to his accounts by casually watching his fingers on the keyboard when he thought I wasn't paying attention. He had no idea how visible he was to someone who actually cared enough to look. Every time I unlocked a new piece of his world, it felt like stepping deeper into a labyrinth I now controlled, and he was trapped inside. The more I learned, the clearer my plan became. It wasn't enough to expose him. I wanted him to feel the ground vanish beneath his feet. I wanted him to see the destruction coming and still be powerless to stop it. I would dismantle everything: his finances, his relationships, his reputation, slowly enough for him to notice each loss, but fast enough to leave him no room to recover. The end wouldn't come like a sudden blow. It would creep up like a shadow until it swallowed him whole. And the best part, he'd never see me as the one holding the knife. I kept up the act flawlessly. Kisses in the morning, playful texts during the day, warm embraces at night. We still went out to dinner, still smiled for photos, still played the part of the perfect couple, but every shared moment was hollow to me, a performance for an audience of one. He thought love made me loyal. He didn't realize it made me patient. I could wait weeks, months, however long it took, because the payoff would be worth it. And every day I waited, my trap tightened around him like a noose he'd tied himself. One evening, as we sat on the couch watching a movie, his phone buzzed with a notification from one of his business partners. He excused himself to take the call, pacing in the hallway, his voice low and urgent. I smiled to myself, knowing that the discomfort he felt now was just the faintest taste of what was coming. I had his secrets, his weaknesses, and the perfect facade to keep him from suspecting a thing. He thought I was too in love to betray him. That was his first mistake. His second would be underestimating just how far I was willing to go. Step 1 was deceptively simple: make him feel safer than ever in my presence. I became the perfect partner again, more attentive, more affectionate, more trusting. I asked about his work as if I cared, praised his achievements, and made him feel like the smartest man alive. It was an illusion. A careful performance meant to lull him into complacency. The more secure he felt, the more reckless he became. And every careless slip was another weapon in my hands. I wasn't just playing along. I was deepening the trap. Step 2 was already in motion before he even sensed danger. The first threads I pulled were in his professional circle. I'd reach out to his business partners, casually, under the guise of friendly conversation. I'd mention small inconsistencies, pretending I'd overheard him say something worrying. Planting doubts without ever pointing fingers. People don't need hard proof to start questioning loyalty, just the right whisper at the right time. Within days, I heard through my own contacts that 2 partners were reconsidering deals with him. I smiled to myself, knowing that their hesitation would spread like a crack in glass. Widening with every word I strategically let slip. Next, I moved to the suppliers. Anonymous emails, masked numbers, every tip carefully crafted to sound like it came from an insider. Cash flow issues, I hinted. Late payments coming soon. They didn't know if it was true, but fear is contagious in business. They began asking for deposits up front, hesitating before shipping orders. Every delay, every added condition, slowed him down and tightened the pressure. He complained to me over dinner, his brow furrowed, muttering about unreliable partners. I nodded sympathetically, offering to help where I could. All while knowing I was the one lighting fires under his feet. The mistress's boyfriend was a gold mine waiting to be tapped. I didn't approach him directly at first, just a burner account with a message, "You deserve to know." Then I began sending him everything. Screenshots of messages, location data from the nights they met, even photos I'd quietly pulled from his phone. The man's rage was instant and volcanic. He didn't just confront her, he made sure her family and friends knew. I could almost see the chaos rippling outward, hitting my ex from an entirely different direction. It was beautiful, coming at him from angles he never expected. Meanwhile, I kept my nightly routine unchanged. I'd slip into bed beside him, lay my head on his chest, and listen to the steady rhythm of his breathing. It was the sound of a man who believed he was untouchable, a man still convinced the world bent to his will. He had no idea that the ground beneath him was shifting with every passing day. I'd watch him sleep and wonder what dreamland looked like for someone so blissfully unaware. Soon, even his dreams would sour, poisoned by the reality I was quietly constructing around him. Every move I made was deliberate. If I cut all his ties at once, he'd know something was wrong. But piece by piece, the ropes that held his little empire together were fraying. Deals fell through, payments stalled, and relationships soured, all without him connecting the dots. It wasn't luck, it was precision. Like a slow leak in a ship's hull, the damage was almost invisible until it was too late. I didn't want him to drown suddenly. I wanted him to feel the cold water rise, inch by inch, while I stood on deck, smiling. Sometimes, I caught him staring into space. Worry lines deepening as if he could sense something slipping from his control. He'd shake his head, dismissing it, then throw himself harder into work to fix things. But the harder he pushed, the more tangled his problems became. His calls grew sharper, his words more frustrated. Yet at home, I stayed the perfect girlfriend, warm dinners, soft kisses, an attentive ear. He thought I was his safe harbor. In truth, I was the storm waiting just beyond the shore, ready to tear apart everything he'd built by the time the first major client pulled out. I knew the dominoes were falling exactly as I'd planned. He raged about betrayal in business, muttering about people turning on him for no reason. I comforted him, rubbing his back, murmuring assurances that things would turn around. But deep inside, I savored every moment. He had trusted me more than anyone, and that trust had become the knife I would use to gut his world. And the best part, he still had no idea I was the one holding it. The real blow hadn't even landed yet. It was almost poetic, the way his world came apart, not in slow motion anymore, but in a violent, unstoppable cascade. The first blow was personal. His mistress, the one he thought adored him, vanished overnight. Her boyfriend had done his job well, shattering her image in front of her family and friends. She left in disgrace, and her silence was louder than any words. He didn't tell me directly, but I could see the tension in his jaw, the way his phone stayed face down on the table. One card was pulled, and the whole deck began to tilt. Then came the professional disaster. His partners, the ones I had so carefully seated with doubt, suddenly withdrew from the biggest deal of his career. It wasn't just a setback, it was a fatal wound to his company's future. Without their backing, the deal collapsed in on itself like a dying star. He stormed through the house that day, slamming doors and barking into his phone, demanding explanations from people who no longer cared to give them. Watching him lose control was like watching a caged predator pace, dangerous, but powerless, trapped in a space too small for his ego. The financial hit followed almost immediately. I'd been meticulous, feeding the right breadcrumbs to the right people, and the tax authorities responded like sharks to blood. His accounts, both the clean ones and the ones he thought were invisible, were frozen due to suspicious activity. I imagined the cold dread that must have gripped him when he saw those red error messages. Realizing his money was untouchable, he had always believed wealth was his shield, but now it was a cage, locking him in. Without cash flow, every other crack in his life began to widen at alarming speed. That was when I delivered the killing blow. A neatly organized folder, each page labeled, each crime documented, sent directly to the authorities. fraud, shell companies, falsified invoices, it was all there, laid out in chronological order. I didn't even need to sign my name. The evidence spoke for itself, and they didn't waste a second. Investigators moved quickly, knocking on doors, questioning associates, freezing assets. From my position, it felt like watching a precision strike. Every step had been planned, every outcome anticipated. It was the culmination of months of quiet, patient destruction, and it landed exactly where I wanted. He confronted me 2 days later, his face a storm of rage and disbelief. He accused everyone, partners, clients, suppliers, before finally turning his fury on me. "You did this," he shouted, his voice cracking under the weight of his downfall. I didn't flinch. The power shift between us was absolute, and he could feel it. He'd spent years thinking he was untouchable, but now, he was standing in front of the one person he should have never underestimated. He didn't want the truth. He wanted someone to blame. And I was happy to be that someone. Just this once, I let him spit his venom, pacing like a man cornered. When his words finally ran out, I met his gaze and smiled. "No," I whispered, my voice calm, almost gentle. "You ruined yourself." I just lit the match. His expression faltered, just for a second, as if he finally saw me for who I was, not the doting partner, but the architect of his collapse. It was a moment I would remember forever, the instant when the predator realized the prey had been hunting him all along. That recognition was worth every second I had spent planning. He left that night, slamming the door so hard the walls rattled. I stood there in the quiet, feeling the weight of the silence he left behind. There was no guilt, no hesitation, only satisfaction. He had taken my loyalty, twisted it, and used it against me. I had simply returned the favor, but on a much grander scale. I knew this wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the end of the man he had built himself up to be, and as much as he wanted to hate me, deep down, he knew I was right. News traveled fast in our circles. Within a week, he was a ghost, his company dissolved, his accounts drained, his reputation in ashes. People who once called him a visionary now whispered his name like a warning. I didn't chase the updates, but they found their way to me all the same. Every story, every rumor, every new low was another reminder that revenge, when executed with precision, doesn't just burn, it erases, and that was the point. He had taken everything from me once. Now, I had taken everything from him. The balance had been restored, and the match had burned out. A month passed, and the wreckage of his life was complete. His apartment, once meticulously decorated to project wealth and success, stood empty. The polished floors no longer reflected expensive shoes, and the air that once smelled of imported cologne now reeked of abandonment. His company was officially dissolved, the name erased from every registry, as if it had never existed. I had driven by once, just to see for myself, and where there had been light and movement, there was now only dust. It was strange how quickly something that took years to build could vanish like it was never real. He'd sold his luxury car, the one he loved to flaunt, to cover what little he could of his mounting debts. I imagined him handing over the keys, his pride taking the first real bite of defeat. He'd always defined himself by what he owned, by the image he projected. Without the car, without the suits, without the expensive watch, he was just another man, one most people wouldn't look at twice. He had left the city soon after, taking a job far beneath his former status, in a place where no one knew his name or his crimes. I never saw him again. But the world is small, and whispers have long shadows. Every so often, I'd run into old acquaintances who'd casually mention him, their voices laced with curiosity or schadenfreude. "Did you hear what happened to him?" they'd ask, leaning in like it was some salacious gossip. I'd smile faintly, pretending to be mildly surprised, and let them talk. Sometimes they got the details right. Sometimes they didn't. But the truth didn't need to be corrected, had already done its work, carving his downfall into the collective memory of everyone who once admired him. In those conversations, I never played the role of the vengeful ex. I kept my tone even, my words soft, and my expression unreadable. I'd shrug and say something like, "I hope he's learned his lesson," leaving the rest to their imagination. People believe what they want, and in this case, they wanted the story to be a cautionary tale. And it was. Not about love or betrayal, but about arrogance. About thinking you could play with fire and never get burned. I knew he carried those burns now, invisible but permanent, etched into the way he moved through the world. Sometimes, late at night, I'd think about the path I'd taken, There was no regret tonally, a deep bone-level satisfaction. He had gambled with my trust, my loyalty, and my dignity, thinking I'd simply walk away quietly when I discovered the truth. But I'd stayed, silent and smiling, until the perfect moment came. It wasn't just revenge, it was a lesson. A reminder that the people you underestimate the most are often the ones capable of doing the most damage when pushed too far. And he had pushed me until there was no other choice left but to push back harder. The city no longer felt haunted by him. I could walk past the places we used to go without feeling the sting of memory. Restaurants, street corners, the coffee shop where he'd first told me he loved me, they were just locations now, stripped of sentiment. In a way, I had reclaimed them, just as I had reclaimed myself. His absence was not a wound but a scar, proof that I had survived and, more importantly, prevailed. And in that silence, I found something I hadn't expected: peace. Not forgiveness, but the kind that comes from knowing justice had been served. Friends occasionally tried to get me to admit the role I'd played. They'd joke about how coincidental his collapse had been, their eyes searching mine for confirmation, but I'd only smile, tilting my head, and say, "Sometimes karma needs a little push." They'd laugh, thinking I meant it metaphorically. Maybe some part of me enjoyed the secrecy, the fact that the truth was mine alone to carry. I didn't need to parade my victory. It was enough to know I'd orchestrated it flawlessly. Like a well-written story, it was better when the ending left people wondering. Life moved on. New faces, new opportunities, and new dreams replaced the shadow he'd once cast over me. But I kept the memory of what I'd done tucked away, not as a burden, but as a reminder of my own strength. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I'd replay it all, not with bitterness, but with the sharp, clean satisfaction of a job completed to perfection. He had taught me many things, though none of them were the lessons he intended. And the most important one was this: karma may be patient, but when it comes, it arrives with precision. Sometimes, it just needs a hand.